The American Egyptian Women of Influence podcast aims to be the American Egyptian culture podcast of choice. We believe that our knowledge and our participants' stories will greatly enhance understanding of both cultures. I'm Karen Leggett Aburaya. Naila Farouky is a graduate of the American University of Cairo. She grew up mostly in Cairo and has built an award-winning career in media and communications across several continents. For more than a decade, Naila managed the production and creative aspects of Sesame Workshop and its productions in the Middle East, Sub-Saharan Africa, and Southeast Asia. After the 2011 revolution in Egypt, Naila returned to Egypt in a variety of roles, including the launch of a monthly news journal called Midan Masr, which is still available online and in print in Arabic and English. Since 2014, Naila has been CEO of the Arab Foundations Forum, a membership-based network of associations and foundations in 9 Arabic-speaking countries. The forum's mission is to strengthen strategic philanthropy in the region. Now, what is the Arab Foundations Forum doing? One of the slogans on your masthead was changing the way we give. What is the foundation doing about that?
So the forum is really more a membership-based association for foundations. So the organization itself is not a grant-making entity at all, correct? So what we do is we have an association of members who are themselves donors and or foundations working across the region. They don't necessarily have to be based in the region, but they have to be working in the region. And what the forum has done, and what we mean by that slogan, or that part of the slogan about changing the way we give, is that, the Arab Foundations Forum was started in 2006. In 2011, it became its own separate entity. So when it first started, it started out as a sub-project to another foundation, and then grew to become its own organization. And really, the aim of the organization was to help bring together a network of foundations and donor agencies around the world, so that they could have shared experiences, so that they could share their knowledge and their resources, and have a little bit more transparency in terms of, sharing information across the sector. And really the way we were looking at it in terms of what we mean by changing the way we give is that we wanted to look at more models of more modern giving. I'm usually a little bit worried to use the word Western giving or to say, philanthropic giving, because it's all philanthropy, but there are just different modules and different kind of modes of philanthropic giving. So we've been very interested in looking at how Arab philanthropy can incorporate, in addition to traditional models of giving, other newer models of giving. So it can include social enterprises, it can include venture philanthropy, and so on.
How is Arab philanthropy, and we will talk directly about Egypt, different from philanthropy in the United States, where many of our listeners will understand it?
So in many ways, it's quite different. But I'm always very sort of aware and conscious to point out, when people ask about philanthropy in the Arab region, they often tend, and I'm not at all saying that that's what you are doing here, but they often tend to ask, tell us about sort of the nascent practice of philanthropy across the Arab region. And the interesting thing is that, of course, the response is always that, well, first of all, philanthropy is nothing new to the region at all. And if anything at all, what we know as the first ever recorded acts of philanthropy came from the Arab region, came from Morocco. It was an endowment that was established by a woman in the 800s. So there's nothing new about philanthropic practice in the Arab region. But how it differs is that a lot of the philanthropy in the Arab region is very much tied to religion. And because it's very much tied to religion, a lot of it tends to be anonymous. And the reason for the anonymity is that there is kind of this understood cultural practice that the more anonymous the giving, the higher the value that's placed on that giving. So, and we've had to have a lot of kind of discussion when we present ourselves and when we present our forum on the international stage, to kind of counter some of the assumptions that parts of the reason for why Arab philanthropy is not transparent is because it has something to hide. And in fact, the reason is a lot less sinister than that. It's not at all because of, I mean, not, I can't say not at all, but in most cases, that is not the reason. The reason why Arab philanthropy doesn't follow the same sort of accountability and transparency practices as the rest of the world includes the fact that a lot of it has to remain anonymous or is culturally inclined to remain anonymous.
That's very interesting. Now, does the foundation have any activities in the United States?
So the forum, as of February 2020, is now a registered 501c3 in the state of Delaware. So it now has a U.S. office. But up until February of this year, that was not the case. We were actually headquartered in Belgium with an operational office out of Jordan. And so we didn't have a U.S. presence. But as of February of this year, we've just registered in the U.S.
And what was the reason for doing that?
So the reason for that, first of all, it's unfortunate for us that we were never able to be headquartered in the Arab region. And a big part of the reason for that has to do with the fact that it's very, very difficult to maintain nonprofit registration status anywhere in the Arab region where the restrictions aren't so debilitating that we are almost rendered incapable of doing our job. And so we've been facing, there's banking issues, there's cross-border giving issues, there's issues with the transaction processes of monies going across borders, and a lot of restriction in terms of how we can spend our money. So the Arab Foundations Forum, or AFF for short, is almost exclusively dependent on donor grants. We have a very small portion of our budget that comes in from membership money, and that money is the only unrestricted source of funding that we have, and is the only unrestricted source of funding that is not under any kind of government scrutiny. But the bulk of our funding comes from, very reputable donors around the world, and yet accepting the money and receiving the money in the region has become increasingly difficult, almost to the point where it's impossible. And then even when it is possible to receive the money, it's so strictly monitored, and not only monitored for purposes of transparency, which we have no issue with whatsoever, but it's also it dictates. It's very largely dictated in terms of how we can use it, how we can spend it, where that money can be spent, and we found that is, by and large, becoming less and less kind of useful to our mission.
All right. Well, this has been fascinating, and we'll provide links so people can find out more about the Arab Foundations Forum and about you. And I thank you very much, Naila.
Thank you so much, Karen. This was really great. I really appreciate it.